Reggie realized that the feelings he had felt when he had seen Rebecca jump out of the cockpit were building again. He hoped that their walk would never end. But he knew it had to. They reached the entrance of the Davis Group offices, and Rebecca went in and straight to the counter. "Hi, my brother Tristan just called and said he'd organized for me to pick up a model of the autonomous vehicle." The person behind the counter quickly called the manager. When the manager saw Rebecca, he didn't hesitate. "Ah, Miss Davis, you're here." She looked a lot like Jonathan, so he did not need to verify her identity. He disappeared to the warehouse and came back with a large box. "Would you like me to have it delivered?" "Perhaps if you could help me get it to the car. I'm not parked too far from here." She knew that the model was quite heavy, and she wasn't sure how fit Reggie was, so she thought it best to take the offer of help. "Okay." The manager smiled warmly again. "Do you need to see anything else?" "No, that's fine. Thank you for this. I'll just pay and go." The manager was quick to shut that down. "No need, Miss Davis, no need. Your brother has already paid." Rebecca thanked him again, and they all made their way back to the parking lot of the restaurant. She wasn't sure if she was imagining it, but she thought that Reggie seemed a little off on the journey back. She couldn't read his expression at all. Reggie wasn't sure of his feelings at that point, because he had heard Rebecca mention a brother called Tristan, and the manager of the store had called her Miss Davis. He was sure that she was a Davis, but he was finding it hard to accept. He was so lost in his thoughts that he didn't hear Rebecca when she spoke. They were almost at their destination, so she tried again. "Where are you parked?" He looked at her thoughtfully and pointed at a black car nearby. She said goodbye to the man who carried the model car for them, and she placed a large box on the front of Reggie's car. "This is for you." He was shocked. "What do you mean?" "Don't you like racing? It's an expensive sport. I can't afford a real car, so I got the next best thing." She smiled. At that moment, Reggie saw some light in the darkness. He repeated what she said about it being too expensive in his head, and concluded that she couldn't be who he had thought. Is she just the daughter of a high-ranking person in the Davis Group? He wondered. Maybe Jonathan Davis just treats her like a daughter. He couldn't see that if she were his daughter, she would have gone to school in Havana. He found it hard to believe that Jonathan would have allowed her to be so far away from him, or that he would allow her to go to the Air Force Academy. Reggie was consoling himself with those thoughts when Rebecca raised her hand and waved it in front of him. "What's wrong? You're like a million miles away." She paused and took a deep breath. "I remembered something that I wanted to say in the restaurant before. I was interrupted and forgot about it." He quietly looked up and gave her his full attention as she continued. "My name isn't Rebecca Gates." The hand in his pocket suddenly clenched into a fist. He felt that the tiny glimmer of light extinguishes completely. Then came the second half of her sentence. "My name is Rebecca Davis. Have you heard of my father, Jonathan Davis? He's the CEO of the Davis Group." Reggie felt an ominous chill run down his spine. Rebecca had seen him freeze, so she just plowed on, hoping he would respond. "I don't know if your father told you about the bad blood between our families. My father said that what happened is in the past and that it should stay there. He told me that it had all been settled by the time I was born, so we can still be friends." Reggie just kept staring at her expressionlessly. He wasn't sure why, but her words invoked anger rather than a feeling of peace. He took a step forward and stared hard at his friend, who still had a smile on her face. "Why didn't you say so earlier? Why are you only telling me now?" Rebecca was taken aback, and she looked up at Reggie in confusion. "What is it that's upsetting you? I didn't say it before because I didn't want to make a big deal of it. Besides, you know about my family, and you know that if my identity is revealed to the public, I might be in danger." Seeing the unpleasant expression on his face, Rebecca retreated half a step and tried to explain further. "I don't think this has anything to do with us. As long as we get along, there's no reason we can't be friends. Besides, I didn't think that I would have much to do with you guys. And there were too many people in school the day we met, so I didn't have the chance to tell you. Yesterday, when you saw me and my brothers together, we didn't try and hide our identities. Before you gave me the bracelet today, I had started to say it, but you interrupted me." Reggie's chest rose and fell. He looked at her in all her innocence and laughed quietly. "It doesn't matter." When they had been in elementary school, she had been somewhat distant with him, but she had explained it away as being busy with her studies. He accepted that. They hadn't been in contact at all after she had left Havana. Several years later, when she arrived at his school to meet with Fiona, they had been friendly and chatted for a bit, but they still hadn't exchanged contact details. It was clear to him that she had never intended to contact him or even thought about him much at all. He wasn't important to her. They had talked the day before, but he guessed that to her, he was just one of her many patients. If he hadn't insisted on treating her to a meal and paying her what she was owed, they wouldn't have spoken at all. She seemed as innocent as she claimed. She didn't know that he had often thought of her after he had seen her on the basketball court 6 months earlier, or that he had secretly learned to fly a plane after hearing that she had been accepted to the Air Force Academy. He didn't want to admit those thoughts that were hidden in the depths of his heart. He had figured that if he didn't meet her again, his thoughts of her would slowly fade away over time. The truth was that the meeting the day before had caused all those hidden thoughts and feelings to grow roots and germinate. He had been attracted by the strength she had exuded as she had gotten off the plane. He had been thrilled to have the chance to make use of her medical expertise. He had been able to pay her for her medical services then, but he had deliberately said he had no money with him because he had wanted the opportunity to see her again. The reality was shattering his image of her. He wanted to accept her, but there were many things that he didn't dare to admit, even to himself. "When did you find out about the feud between our families?" he asked. "Not long after I met you. Your name seemed familiar, and I told Dad. He didn't say anything much at that time. He only said that he was friendly enough with your father, but that they didn't talk to each other. He didn't say why, and I didn't ask. I was busy at the time and didn't think any more of it. He briefly explained it to me later." Reggie just stared at her, because it was similar to what his father had said about him and Jonathan being civil, but not having a relationship. The difference to Reggie was that Rebecca had long known who he was, but he had been kept in the dark. "I like you and Layla, and have always thought of you as friends," Rebecca said. She thought he was still angry about their family grudge match. "When I went to Mexico, I found out what it was like to be in a real war zone. I saw many people lose their homes in the fighting, and many who were separated from their loved ones." She looked him squarely in the eye. "If you went through those things yourself, you might find that there are a lot of things that don't need to be focused on. Our families have a bitter past, but it's in the past. Neither of us have done anything to harm the other, so there's no need for us to be embroiled in the conflicts between our families." She was unsure how to carry on when he still didn't say anything. "Maybe you blame me for hiding it. That was wrong, and I apologize to you. Because I was worried about my safety and didn't want to be singled out, I hid my true identity from all my friends. Friends should be honest with each other, so it wasn't my best move. I'm sorry." Reggie found that he still couldn't make his tightly clenched hands release. His lips moved, but he didn't know what to say. He found it strange that it was he who had lost his composure. In the ensuing silence, Rebecca pointed at the model car. "Take this as an apology." She couldn't think of anything else to say, and she decided it was time for her to leave. "It's a little cold, so I'll head home. I have to go to my grandfather's place." He still didn't respond, and neither did he move. Rebecca smiled, waved, and went to her car. As she drove away, she could still see him standing motionless in her rearview mirror. Reggie stood beside his car and stared blankly into space, deep in thought. He shook his head slightly, and his gaze landed on the box with the model car in it. The box lay exactly where Rebecca had left it. He had wanted to buy that particular model car, but the stores were always out of stock. It was a limited edition, so it was hard to come by. He smirked as he realized the irony of the situation. He picked up the box and looked at it one last time before throwing it into a nearby trash can. Reggie spun around and was about to open his car door when he noticed a young man approaching the trash can with a surprised look on his face. The young man looked around and was about to take the box out of the trash can when Reggie darted back and grabbed it. The young man gasped in protest. "Hey, I saw that first." Reggie glared at him angrily. "It's mine. I threw it away a few seconds ago." The young man frowned and noticed Reggie's red eyes. Not wanting to get into a fight, the young man rolled his eyes in dismay and walked away. Reggie carried the box back to his car and placed it on the passenger seat. He stared at it for a while, sighed as he switched on the car's ignition, and drove away. Layla had been busy all day and hadn't even had a moment to rest when she heard Reggie come home. She looked at him, puzzled. "You're home earlier than I expected. I thought you had said you were busy today." Reggie shook his head. "No, not anymore." He carried the box upstairs and walked to his bedroom without saying anything else. Layla shrugged and picked up her phone to send Bruno a message. Reggie pushed his bedroom door open and put the box on his desk. He closed the door behind him and carefully opened the box. The shiny model car was even better in real life than in the pictures he had seen. He picked it up and turned it over to inspect it. Then, he carefully packed it back in the box before putting it on the lowest shelf of his cupboard. He closed the cupboard door and sighed. He leaned back in his chair and stared out the window. He thought about Rebecca and her revelation and decided it was probably better that he had found out the truth sooner rather than later. But the truth didn't change the way he felt about her. He reached over for the practice exam paper on his desk and began to work on the answers. He buried himself in the questions and had lost all track of time when he heard a knock on his door. The housekeeper was standing outside in the hallway, holding a tray with the medicine she had prepared for him. "Your medicine is ready." Reggie pointed to the bedside table. "Just put it over there." The housekeeper did as she was told and turned to leave. "Remember that you have to drink it while it's warm." She smiled and quickly left the room, closing the door behind her. She didn't understand why he had been so adamant about taking the medication just the day before, but now seemed uninterested. Reggie busied himself with another set of questions, but the bitter aroma of the medicine distracted him. He threw his pen down and stomped across the room. He picked up the steaming mug and swallowed the liquid in one gulp. He gagged and scowled as he put the mug back on the tray. He stomped back to his desk and picked up his phone as he sat down. After scrolling through his contact list, he stopped on Rebecca's details. He pressed the delete button and hovered his finger over the confirmation prompt. He stared at the screen, unable to bring himself to accept the confirmation. Suddenly, his bedroom door swung open and Layla burst in, startling him. With the shock of her unexpected entrance, his finger touched the confirmation prompt, and Rebecca's contact details were deleted. Reggie looked at Layla and then at his phone, and his heart sank. He was about to scold her when he saw that her eyes were wet with tears, and she looked distraught. Layla stood in the middle of his room, and her chest heaved up and down as she sobbed. "My granny's gone. She died in her sleep. Mom phoned me a few minutes ago to tell me." She wiped her tears with the back of her hands. "Granny told her she was going to take a nap, and then she never woke up. I have to leave right away." She shook her head. "I would have stayed with her longer had I known she was going to pass away. I would have been able to say goodbye to her." Reggie felt sorry for Layla. He knew she had a close relationship with Josephine, and her heart-wrenching tears instantly made him forget his worries. He got up and put his arm around her. "Are you leaving this afternoon? Is Dad home yet?" Layla shook her head again and tried to reply in between sobs. "He's at the office. I want to go now." Reggie handed her a tissue. "You can't drive in this state. I'll take you." Layla nodded appreciatively and blew her nose. "Okay, I'll go get my coat." As they got into the car, Reggie turned to her. "Does Bruno know?" Layla's eyes were red and swollen from crying. Yeah, I told him already. He said he'd come. Why don't we pick him up and take him with us? Reggie drove in silence while Layla sobbed softly. They picked Bruno up, and he sat in the back and also didn't say anything. Instead, he stared out of the window and watched the city disappear in the distance. They reached Josephine's small town, and Layla ran into her mother's arms. Her warm tears streamed down her cheeks and soaked Zoe's blouse as they hugged. Although Josephine's funeral was plain and simple, many of the small town's residents attended to pay their last respects. Josephine had been a beloved member of their community, and it was a solemn event. Zoe cried until her eyes were red and puffy. Her biological parents had disowned her, and Josephine had become the supportive mother she had always wished for. The old woman had taken Zoe and Layla under her wing and had treated them as if they were her own family. They bid their last farewell to Josephine with heavy hearts. Zoe returned to Havana with Layla. Bruno had started his first year of university, and Zoe's employment with Isabella had ended. They had concluded Zoe's final paycheck and said their goodbyes for the last time. Bruno stayed at the university dorm during the semester and would only return home when he was on vacation. Zoe and Layla had moved out of the Torres villa, so he was usually alone while at home. One day, Layla was feeling especially sad about Josephine's passing and didn't want to go home to study after school. Instead, she asked Bruno to take her to play video games at a nearby arcade. Zoe wanted to give her daughter space to grieve and also forget about her sadness, so she agreed and didn't make a fuss. Layla and Bruno arrived at the arcade, and because Layla hadn't played video games for so long, she had almost forgotten what to do. The newer games were mostly simulations, and Bruno had to rescue her several times. They spent the whole afternoon playing until Layla was exhausted. Bruno suggested they have a milkshake, and he took her to a nearby ice cream parlor. As they sat and sipped their milkshakes, Bruno had an idea. Hey, Layla, do you want to come back to the villa with me and see your old home? Layla looked up at him with large eyes. Do you mean now? Bruno nodded. Yeah. She smiled faintly. Okay, suppose I can. Bruno drove through town, and they arrived at the house after a short drive. The security guard at the main gate smiled when he saw her. Hello. I haven't seen you or your mother in a long time. Where do you go to school now? Layla smiled politely. I'm preparing for the university entrance exam. The security guard smiled and gave her a thumbs up. Good luck. It was nice to see you, and tell your mother that I send my regards. Bruno unlocked the front door and gestured for Layla to enter. As she walked into the front entrance hall, she realized everything still looked exactly the same as when she had left. At that time, Bruno had begged his mother to allow Zoe and Layla to continue living there, but she had refused. She was always too busy to return home, so Bruno lived there alone when he wasn't at university. Layla walked into the living room and gazed at the familiar sights. Nothing had changed much. The same pictures hung on the walls, and the ornaments on the mantelpiece had gathered dust. Bruno walked up to her and gently took her hand in his. His skin was warm, and his long, slender fingers wrapped around her hand. She turned to face him, feeling slightly flustered. She wanted to pull away, but he gripped her tightly. Her heart began to beat faster, and she quickly looked away. Let's go see your old bedroom. Bruno held her hand as he led her up the staircase and down the hallway. He opened her bedroom door, and Layla gasped softly. Apart from the personal items that she had taken with her when they had moved out, the room looked the same as it had for the 10 years that she had stayed there. The familiarity brought tears to her eyes, and she choked up. She opened the bedside drawer and closed it again before switching the bedside lamp on and off. She then walked over to the wardrobe and opened it. She ran her fingers over the marks that had been left from where she had stuck stickers on the mirror and smiled, recollecting her happy childhood. She spun around to look at Bruno. It's like I never left. Everything is still so familiar. Her words echoed in her heart as she gazed at him. She remembered the little boy who had gawked at her and stuck his tongue out when they had just met. He had matured into a handsome young man who had no longer looked at her with cold indifference. He was much taller than her, casting a long shadow over her as the light from the hall filled the dim room. Time seemed to stand still, and an indescribable feeling washed over Layla. She felt Bruno's gaze on her, and she smiled nervously. He stepped closer, and her heart beat faster in anticipation as he lowered his head. The distance between them closed, and Layla felt her palms begin to sweat. Bruno leaned forward and kissed her softly. His movements were gentle and quiet, and she felt the warmth of his breath against her skin. She held her breath and tilted her chin up while he pressed his lips against hers. Only their lips touched, and if Layla pulled her head back slightly, she would be separated from him, but she didn't move. Her skin tingled and her mind went blank. After what seemed like an eternity, Bruno slowly drew his lips away and carefully tucked a lock of her hair behind her ear as she exhaled and trembled. He gently cupped her face in his hands and looked deep into her eyes. She gazed at him and noticed a softness she had never seen before. "Layla, will you be my girlfriend?" Her mouth curled into a smile, and she inhaled softly. She felt as if she were in a dream and wanted to pinch herself, but Bruno lowered his head and kissed her again. This time, he pressed against her with more force and drew her body close against his. Layla felt her knees go weak, and she closed her eyes, allowing him to kiss her passionately. He wrapped his arms around her, and she put her hands against his chest. She could feel his heart pound against his ribcage as he held her tightly in his arms. As he kissed her, Layla became aware of his burning desire, and she felt as if she would faint. Bruno kissed Layla for a long time, as if savoring the moment. He pulled away slightly and leaned his forehead against hers as they caught their breaths. He looked into her eyes and spoke in a low voice. "Wait for me to graduate from university. When I return, I promise I'll provide for you and give you the life you deserve. This will be your home, and you won't have to worry about anything again." Layla knew that he wasn't just talking about her, but himself as well. Isabella had given the house to him when he was old enough in an effort to prove that she wasn't as heartless as she had come across. But the place wasn't a home. It was a structure, devoid of the spark of life that made it a home. Unlike Bruno, Layla had a mother and a father who loved and cared for her, but her life wasn't perfect. Zoe had met someone and no longer had lived alone. At first, she hadn't wanted to get married, but Layla had insisted that she think about herself. She had convinced her mother to put her needs first for a change, and Zoe had found companionship in a man who had treated Layla as his own. He was a decent man who didn't expect Zoe to have more children. Instead, he treated her like a queen and filled the emptiness in Zoe that she had never expected anyone could. Oliver had never gotten married, although he was in a serious relationship. He didn't need to get married since he already had an heir, and being the wife of the family patriarch wasn't every woman's cup of tea either. Zoe and Oliver would never have gotten married just because of Reggie and Layla. Their worlds were too different, and it wouldn't have brought them any happiness. But they both gave their children all their love, and neither child ever felt neglected or unloved. Although Layla and Reggie had grown up with two loving parents and had had happy childhoods, they had never experienced the life of a traditional family unit, with a mother and father living under the same roof, happily in love with one another. Bruno wanted to give Layla a life where she had a husband, a handful of children, and a home to raise them in. His words made her heart leap into her throat, and she couldn't choke back her tears of joy. He held her tightly and gazed into her eyes. "I've never asked a girl to be my girlfriend before. I've always only ever liked you." She slowly put her arms around his waist and felt his body tense up. "I know." She had known that he had feelings for her since they were in high school, and although he had always been a difficult person, she had seen a change in him and had noticed how he had started to treat her differently than when they were young children. They had gone to school and skipped classes together. He had gotten into fights for her, and they had happily experienced their rebellious youths in one another's company. They had developed a bond that was almost impossible to break. Layla had been concerned when Bruno had started university. She had heard that university girls were bolder in their approach to boys, and the dating scene was far more vibrant than in high school. She had secretly feared that he would fall in love with someone else. She had thought the 2-year age gap between them would mean he would move on without her, while she still had to finish high school. She had been worried that she would never catch up to him. But that afternoon, standing in the dim light of her old bedroom, with her arms wrapped around him and his head pressed against hers, Layla knew she had nothing to worry about anymore. She smiled and sighed. Bruno wiggled out of her arms and led her downstairs to the living room. He picked her up and carried her to the couch, where he switched the TV on. Layla leaned against him as they tried to watch, but neither could concentrate. As the sun set in the evening sky, Layla saw a message from her mother. She looked at Bruno with large eyes. "I have to go home soon." He nodded, and their eyes locked. "Kiss me one more time before you leave." He inched closer and kissed her with intense passion. She leaned back into the couch and felt his body weight press against her. Bruno felt his blood burn with desire and suddenly pulled away, stopping himself from losing control. Stunned, Layla watched him jump to his feet and disappear into the bathroom. She waited for a while and became concerned that she had done something wrong. She quietly got up and knocked on the bathroom door. "Bruno, are you okay?" She heard him shuffle in the bathroom and was surprised to hear him sound flustered. "Go away, I'm fine. I'll be out in a minute." Layla shrugged and returned to the couch while Bruno got his desires under control in the bathroom. When he eventually came out, he saw her sitting on the couch looking dejected and confused. He smiled faintly. "Are you hungry?" Her eyes were wet, and she was about to start crying. "What did I do wrong? Why are you mad at me?" Bruno blushed, not sure how to explain his odd behavior. "No, I'm not mad at you. I'm just angry with myself." Layla frowned. "Why?" He shook his head. "Don't worry about it. It's nothing." He felt his ears turn red and realized he needed to go outside to cool off. He picked up his coat and wrapped it around Layla before tying his scarf around her neck. "Let me take you home." Layla looked at him, concerned. "Won't you be lonely here, all by yourself?" Bruno grinned. "Not if you come to visit me." She smiled sweetly. "Okay, I think I can do that." He looked into her large eyes and sighed as he thought, "I'm the luckiest guy to have such an amazing girlfriend." He put his arm around her and gave her a gentle squeeze. "Come on, we don't want to keep your mother waiting." Bruno drove Layla home with a broad smile on his face. As they arrived at her house, he looked into her eyes. "Work hard at school, and make sure you score well in the university entrance exam. I'll be waiting for you." Layla cocked her head to the side and frowned as if she just realized something. "Have you been holding back because you're worried you'll distract me from my schoolwork?" He took her hand in his and smiled. "I don't think I need to explain that. Besides, I think you knew how I felt about you." Layla smiled back at him. "Yeah, I've always known." She opened the car door and skipped toward her front door. Bruno sat in the car and waited until she had disappeared from his line of sight before driving away. He rolled down the window and let the wind blow his unruly hair. The cool air helped him calm down and gather his thoughts. The Air Force Academy didn't give their students very long vacations, and Rebecca was excited to resume her training. She returned to her dorm early on the first day to drop off her belongings, before classes started. As she put her bags down, she heard her roommate Casey enter the room. "Hey, Rebecca, guess what?" Rebecca looked at her with a puzzled expression. "I don't know. What is it?" Casey grinned, and her eyes sparkled. "I have a boyfriend." Rebecca smiled. "Wow! Since when? Who's the lucky guy?" Casey blushed slightly. "It happened during the semester break. Do you remember Tyler? You met him on our first day here." Rebecca nodded. "Yeah, congratulations. I thought he was into you. You've known him for quite a long time already. Why have you only started dating now? Casey shrugged. I think it's because I was still in high school, so he waited until I got to university. Besides, my parents didn't want me to date until I had graduated from school. They've also known Tyler for as long as I can remember, and they've always liked him. She looked at Rebecca pensively. How come you don't have a boyfriend yet? Casey's question took Rebecca by surprise, and she took a while to answer. I guess I'm not ready to date yet. There's still plenty of time. Casey grinned, and she looked as though she wanted to gossip. I know of several boys who like you. There's one in particular who asked me about you. Rebecca raised her eyebrows. Yeah? What exactly did he want to know? Casey sat down on the edge of her bed. Well, he was asking on behalf of another guy. He wanted to know if you had a boyfriend and what your favorite hobbies are. Rebecca laughed. What did you say? Casey gave her a half shrug. Not too much. I told him that you're interested in alternative medicine and flying planes. I even added that your dream boyfriend should probably know how to fly. She flicked her ponytail. When the other guys heard that, they all started to look smug because they're all learning to become pilots. Suddenly, all of them thought they'd be the best boyfriend for you. Rebecca laughed and shook her head helplessly. She thought about a specific pilot and felt butterflies in her stomach. He had led her through a smoke-filled battlefield and had instructed her to fly a plane even though he hadn't been able to see. He had become the pilot of her heart. Rebecca worked hard that semester. Her classes focused on the theoretical aspects of being a pilot, such as aerospace laws and the mechanics of various types of aircraft. Although she and Kyle hadn't seen each other in months, they had messaged frequently and had remained in contact. Kyle had spent most of his time deployed on various missions, and although he had tried his best to arrange a deployment close to Rebecca to see her, his plans had never worked in his favor. The semester started to draw to a close, and Rebecca decided to apply for volunteer work during the summer vacation. The academy had posted several volunteer opportunities for the students. One specific project was to assist a poverty-stricken seaside village on the island of Martinique, which was particularly vulnerable during the hurricane season. News that the team for Martinique had been finalized quickly spread across the academy, and Rebecca eagerly hurried to the notice board in the hallway to see who had been selected. She whooped with glee when she saw her name listed as one of the volunteers. The volunteer work involved setting up disaster management services to help the locals effectively deal with hurricanes. The team would assist them in understanding early warning systems and how to manage the aftermath. Students were excited about the project because they would be spending their vacation in a warm and tropical climate. When Rebecca arrived on the small island, she posted a message on her social media to let everyone know she had landed safely. Layla gave her message a thumbs up and turned her phone toward Reggie. He had been busy checking the university's bulletin for his entrance exam results. Look, Rebecca's in Martinique. That's so exciting. I can't wait to start university and to travel and visit exotic places just like her. Reggie didn't look up. Instead, he refreshed the university's webpage. It's loading. Layla felt her shoulders tense up. Do you see anything yet? Yeah. Can I check first, or do you want to? She rolled her eyes at him. You go first. He carefully captured his reference number and password. The next screen prompted him to click the confirm button before displaying the results. He clicked the button, glanced at the screen, and then pushed the laptop to face Layla. Take a look. Layla looked at the screen, and her eyes lit up with excitement. Reggie, that's amazing! You're allowed to choose any major you'd like. She exited the page and nervously entered her credentials. Her palms began to sweat as she typed in her password and waited for her results to load. Her face dropped slightly when she saw that she had scored lower than Reggie, but her results were still higher than average, and she could choose from several majors to study. Layla had already decided she wanted to enroll at the same university as Bruno, so she eagerly took a photo of her results and hurried to her room to phone him. Her score was good enough to apply to study software design, and she clapped her hands with delight. Bruno answered his phone almost immediately. "Hey, Layla." He sounded distracted. "Bruno, I got my results. I can apply to study at the Technological University of Havana. Just like you." The excitement in her voice was contagious, and Bruno laughed happily. "That's fantastic. Congratulations. I guess I'll see you around campus soon." Layla grinned. "Yeah, I'll submit my application form in a couple of days. I'll let you know when I can visit, and you can show me around campus." "I can't wait." Bruno hung up and glared at the two thugs who had surrounded him. One of them sneered. "How sweet. Was that your girlfriend? I wonder if she'd still like you when she learns about your background." Bruno kept quiet and took a deep breath. The other thug laughed. "Yeah, what if we tell her about your father?" He had a sinister smile and clenched his fists. Bruno's eyes darkened, and he spoke through gritted teeth. "Do you want to die today?" The first thug chuckled. "Is that a threat?" He stretched his arms out and balled his hands into fists as he made jabs in the air. The other man chimed in. "Yeah, we're not afraid of you. Do you think your training will be of any use against us?" He clapped his hands, and a few more thugs strolled out of the shadows. The thugs looked rough, with tattoos all over their bodies and faces. It was evident that they were part of a gang. The first thug's lips curled into an ugly smile. "Come on, boys. Hit him where it hurts. But stay away from his face. He's got a girlfriend to impress." The gang of thugs surrounded Bruno. Layla and Reggie finalized which universities they wanted to enroll at and submitted their applications. They had to be sure of what they wanted to major in, because once their applications were in, they wouldn't be able to change their minds. Layla was so excited that she phoned Bruno as soon as she had submitted her application. It rang once, and then the call was canceled. She had been trying to get a hold of Bruno for a couple of days, but his phone rang and went to voicemail each time she called. Layla frowned and tried again. This time, the phone went straight into voicemail without even ringing.
"Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system,"
meaning the phone had been switched off. Her optimism about applying to university was soon replaced by worry. She felt uneasy that she couldn't reach Bruno. She quickly opened her messaging app and tried to call him, but there was no response. She narrowed her eyes and put her phone away before running downstairs to find Reggie. Reggie was in the living room with his nose in a textbook. "Reggie, can you help me with something, please?" He nodded and closed his book. "Yeah, sure. What is it?" He could see that there was something wrong by the worried look in her eyes. "I can't get a hold of Bruno. I've been trying for the last few days, but his phone is off, and he hasn't been active on social media either. I know you've been helping Dad with the company, and you have some of his contacts. Can you ask them to help find Bruno?" Reggie looked at her and crossed his arms over his chest. "Yeah, maybe. But first, you have to tell me, are you and Bruno dating?" Layla blushed slightly, and Reggie's stare made her uncomfortable, but she nodded. He sighed and stood up. "Okay, I'll sort it out for you. I'll let you know when I have any news." Layla beamed and wanted to hug him, but knew better not to. "Thanks, Reggie. I owe you one." She skipped out of the living room and left the house. Reggie had been working with Oliver for a few years already, getting the hang of running the family business, and he knew who to contact without Oliver's intervention. After he had arranged for one of their henchmen to investigate Bruno, he returned to his room and opened a news app on his phone. The news about a powerful hurricane that had hit the Caribbean dominated the headlines. The hurricane had made landfall on the island of Martinique, destroying several small seaside villages. A large number of residents had perished, and several more had been injured. Reggie quickly clicked on the video links and watched a live report from one of the destroyed villages. The reporter explained that an international volunteer group had been working in the village, and the volunteers were among the injured and dead. Reggie's eyes widened, and his mouth twitched as he looked at the footage. He felt a shiver run down his spine. He recalled that Layla had told him that Rebecca was on the island. He was about to call Layla when he heard her voice coming from downstairs, so he walked over to the landing. Layla looked up at him with a broad smile on her face. "Reggie, I have great news. Bruno just phoned me. He lost his wallet and phone and had to replace everything." Reggie nodded. "Yeah, great." Layla's eyes twinkled. "I'm going out now to meet up with him." She was about to turn to leave when Reggie bolted down the staircase. "Layla, wait. I need to check something on your phone." Layla frowned, puzzled by his odd behavior, but reluctantly handed him her phone. He opened her messaging app and typed a few letters into the search bar to bring up Rebecca's profile. Rebecca had posted a selfie with an airport in the background. He quickly read the caption. "I'm in Martinique. It's beautiful here. I'm doing volunteer work." There was also a more recent status update. It was a photo of a small fishing village. It looked similar to the one he had just seen in the online footage. No other status updates or pictures had been posted since then. Layla watched the color drain out of her brother's face. "What's the matter? Did something happen?" Reggie quickly closed the app and passed the phone back to her. "Never mind. It's nothing." Layla shrugged. She was too excited to see Bruno to concern herself with Reggie. She was used to him acting strange. Layla had arranged to meet Bruno at the main entrance to the Technological University of Havana. She drove through the main gates and parked in the visitors' parking lot before getting out of the car to find Bruno. Much to her relief, she found him waiting on the steps for her. He was wearing a black t-shirt and blue jeans. He looked freshly showered and neat. She beamed when she saw him and hurried over. Bruno smiled at her. "Welcome to your future. I'll take you for a tour." He reached out his hand and clasped hers tightly. Layla grinned at him. "I can't wait to start, but I still have to receive my acceptance letter. I hope my entrance exam scores were high enough." Bruno nodded. "I'm sure you'll get in. We'll study together, and then I'll start working as soon as I've graduated. I'll save enough money for us to get married as soon as you've graduated." Layla felt herself blush, and her palms started to sweat. "I haven't even started, and you're already talking about our future." Bruno chuckled. "Yeah, it won't be long, and we'll both be out of university." Layla quickly changed the subject. "I've heard that there's a beautiful lake here on the main campus. Will you show me, please?" They held hands as they walked across the sprawling campus toward the lake. A few students milled about and glanced at them. Layla felt as though her heart would burst with happiness. In just a few short weeks, she would also be strolling around as a student, and she couldn't wait. Most importantly, she would have Bruno at her side. Since she could remember, he had always been there. She had always liked him, and he had become one of the most important people in her life. She looked at him with bright eyes. Bruno noticed her gaze. "Is something the matter?" She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him on the cheek. Bruno stopped walking, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her on the lips. Layla and Bruno were on campus, kissing. She put her arms around his waist. His body stiffened slightly with pain, but he endured it and deepened the kiss. He finally let her go and noticed her red cheeks. He leaned in close to her ear. "You're very cute." Layla felt embarrassed and jumped as if she had been electrocuted. "You've really got the hang of this sweet-talking thing, haven't you?" She found it hard at times to reconcile the quiet and gloomy boy she had first met with the smiley, chatty one in front of her. They spent the entire afternoon strolling around the lake on campus and meandering through the small forest. At one point, they stopped at a small restaurant right by the entrance to the university to try their specialty dish. It was already evening when Bruno received a call from the residence hall manager of his dorm. The manager told him that a delivery that needed to be signed for had arrived and that it was big. He also requested that Bruno get back as soon as he could to move it out of the way. Bruno had purchased indoor fitness equipment online, and he agreed to head back to move the equipment. Layla was reluctant to part with him. "Are you going home?" He looked at the time and asked if she wanted to join him. As soon as he had spoken, the rain started to fall. He grabbed her hand, and they quickly crossed the street to hail a cab. Fortunately, they didn't have to wait for long before they saw one approaching. Layla waved to get its attention, but as she did so, The car in front of the taxi suddenly drove straight at her. The car braked as it got close, but the ground was a little slippery, and it had been moving fast. She didn't have much time to react before it was right in front of her. She was terrified, and everything seemed to go in slow motion. She retreated, but not quickly enough. She was about to be hit by the car, but instead, she was struck by a huge force from the side and fell safely. The car continued on the same path, and it was Bruno who ended up standing unbalanced in front of it. The side mirror clipped him, and he stumbled to the ground. Layla had recovered just quickly enough to see what had happened. Her fear intensified as she ran toward him. He had a bloody wound on his palm and was covered in mud, and he had a sheepish look on his face. The car stopped, and the people inside rolled down the window. They looked at the couple on the ground. As soon as Bruno saw who was in the car, his body stiffened again. His mother was sitting in the passenger seat. "Bruno?" Isabella sounded a little surprised by the turn of events. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" Although she asked the right questions, she had no intentions of getting out of the car to find out. Layla was horrified at what she was witnessing and felt hopelessly sad for Bruno. She couldn't understand such a lack of concern or emotion from a parent. In her experience, parents generally felt sad when their children were upset or hurt. Bruno's jacket had hooked onto the car mirror and had been dragged a couple of yards by the car. He was bleeding, but Isabella was more worried about the fact that she would get wet than she was about her wounded son. Rain continued to fall, and he stood up. He looked at her and did his best to show nothing on his face about how he was feeling. "It's fine. I'm not hurt." The rain soaked his t-shirt and made it stick to his body. His previous wound, the one that hadn't yet healed, was also hurting. He tried not to show that either. He stood straight and tall and kept his face blank. Isabella nodded. "I'm pleased that you're all right. We're off to an event, so we haven't got time to talk further." The driver nodded as well, but said nothing. "Okay, have fun," Bruno replied. Isabella glanced at Layla, noticed her expression, and looked abruptly away. The car's windows closed, and they drove on. Layla put her hand on Bruno's arm, although she kept her touch light. "Does it hurt?" He shook his head and tried to smile convincingly. "It doesn't hurt. I'm fine." "Bruno, that was dangerous. You shouldn't have saved me like that." She couldn't shake a lingering fear that he was more badly hurt than he let on. She lifted his hand and saw the blood. It made her feel as if her heart had been sliced in two. Ignoring the cold water running off their bodies, she wrapped her arms around him, not caring what anyone around them would think. He looked down at her and hugged her back. "I'm used to it." His tears were undetectable as they mingled with the rain. "You don't have to be upset for me." The more Layla listened to Bruno, the more distressed she felt. He clearly felt that no one in the world loved him, so she swore that she would love him extra well from that point. They held the next cab, and the two of them clambered gratefully into the car. Layla used the light inside to carefully examine his wound. She took out a tissue and helped him carefully wipe it. He watched her quietly and without a trace of bitterness in his eyes. He had always thought himself quite unlucky, and that the only positive thing from his youth was having met her. When they arrived at his dorm, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. They went to find the dorm manager, who pointed out the package to Bruno. It was heavy but well sealed, and the manager used his car to help Bruno move it. Layla had been there a few times and knew the layout well enough. She went to find something to disinfect the wound on Bruno's hand because it wasn't bad enough to need bandaging. It really just needed to be cleaned and left to dry and heal. They went to his dorm room, where she took care of disinfecting his wound, and while she was putting the things away, she accidentally brushed her hand over his back. She heard him inhale sharply. She was puzzled until she realized that he had seemed to be moving slower than usual that day. She looked at him with concern. "Is there something else wrong with you?" He shook his head, but she didn't believe him. She took advantage of the fact that he wasn't looking back at her and lifted his top. Painful-looking purple scabs were revealed, and she was shocked. Is someone hurting you again? She knew that years earlier, he had suffered badly at the hands of some bullies. He hadn't told her himself, but she had been aware. It's just a flesh wound. It'll heal quickly. Layla's eyes blazed with anger. She stubbornly looked him over and then touched the swollen area very gently. Her fingers barely brushed over it before she lowered her head and kissed him there just as carefully. Bruno felt all the blood in his body surge to the place Layla had kissed. It didn't hurt, but it made the area itchy. He swallowed loudly. Don't be like this, Layla. She didn't understand what he meant, and she kissed him again with empathy in her eyes. She wrapped her arms around him and couldn't bear to let go. He turned to see her and looked her in the eyes. She could see the battle raging in his. His fingers that were hanging by his side tightened and loosened on repeat. Layla didn't know what to say. She was about to speak when her lips were pressed hard against his. The kiss was different to any of the others that they had shared. It was filled with determination and a kind of madness, and she felt burned by the different temperatures it aroused within her. She found it hard to stay steady on her feet, and she crashed into the wall. He merely followed and continued to kiss her. She felt as though all the air had been sucked out of her, and the lack of oxygen was making her feel powerless. She wanted to cling to him, but she was afraid of inflicting more pain. She breathed shallowly, and her heart felt as though it wanted to jump out of her throat. Before she realized what was happening, they had reached the couch. His forehead was pressed against hers, and his eyes were filled with emotions that she couldn't understand. Sometimes, I feel that I'm not good enough for you. Layla was shocked at the direction his thoughts had taken, although his words helped her own emotions settle. She shook her head. Why do you say that? You're a good man. Truly good. Bruno's eyes were as dark as ink. I'm not really. Well, you sometimes seemed quite rude while we were growing up, and you had a bit of a bad temper, but you were always good to me, and you were always good to my mom. She loves you. She looked at him anxiously. Bruno didn't say anything, but he studied her closely as he thought. Her heart ached for him, so she continued in her attempt to console him. I know that your biological family situation is complicated, but no one can choose what happens there. You've chosen your own pathway since, and are nothing like your mother and father. You've always been a good person. That should be enough. As he looked at her, she saw the sad look in his eyes disappear. Really? He asked. She nodded. Yes, and I really like you. Bruno looked at the bright light in Layla's eyes. His mind was churning, but he felt like a lost sailor who had finally found a lighthouse. He just wanted to get closer to her. He picked her up and carried her to the bed, and she didn't even notice when her clothes disappeared. She felt only a small amount of fear through the fog that had descended. He cradled her and stared deeply into her eyes. Can you be my sunshine forever? She looked at the scars on his body, and the fog grew thicker until the only thing she was aware of was the heartache and love that resided in her heart. She nodded slowly. She felt as if she were dreaming, apart from one moment of clarity and pain. Her phone was ringing again and again in the living room, but she didn't hear it. In her world, there was only Bruno. He held her in his arms as he gently caressed her. I love you, Layla. Layla's heart skipped a beat. She knew that Bruno wasn't the kind of person to speak his mind, but at that moment, he had shown her his heart. Her whole body was sore and uncomfortable, but she couldn't help but smile. After taking a shower, she was a little embarrassed about going back into the bedroom. Bruno had her phone in his hands when she finally did. Your mom called you several times. Wrapped in a towel, she grabbed the phone. She didn't dare look at him as she called her mom. He noticed her pink face and the creamy skin that was on show outside of the towel. He forced himself to look away and went to the adjoining, leaving the space for her to talk. In the bedroom, Layla was explaining to her mom that she hadn't heard her phone. She agreed that it was time to head home. She couldn't believe that she had been with Bruno like that. She looked at the red stain on the bedsheet, and her heart flip-flopped all over again. In the room next door, Bruno was staring at a document on the table. He triple-checked the information and then signed the document. He had made a will with Layla as the beneficiary. He knew that she didn't need it, but he wanted to give her everything that he could. What had happened earlier that day had been too dangerous. He even wanted to give her an alarm to carry, because he knew that, while they were going to be at the same university, his pursuers would keep looking for opportunities to hurt him. There were bodyguards around, but even they weren't foolproof. He couldn't take risks with her. He was deep in thought when he heard footsteps. He hurriedly put the document in the drawer and set a reminder to find a lawyer to notarize it the next morning. He went back to the bedroom and saw that Layla had already changed into her clothes. She was still shy and could barely look at him. "Mom asked me to go home." "Okay, I'll take you." He grabbed the car keys and left with her. He had done work on a project a few months earlier and had bought a car with the surplus profit. He had also accumulated a small savings. The car was ordinary and the savings weren't much, but it was a good start. He used his left hand to drive the car and his right hand to hold Layla's. She thought that it was sweet and stole an occasional glance at him. When he parked the car at her home, he turned and looked at her reluctantly. They had already been in a relationship for some time, but the bond between them felt stronger than ever after having taken the next step. They both wished that they could be together at all times. "I'll call you tomorrow and pick you up," he said. "Where are we going?" "I haven't thought about it yet. Why don't you come back to my dorm? We can take a look at that fitness equipment I bought." Layla thought of something and blushed again. Bruno saw it and had a strong urge to kiss her. "I went back on my word. I'm sorry that I couldn't wait for you to graduate. But when you do, I still want to marry you." Her heart pounded and she accidentally snorted when she gasped with surprise. He thought it was adorable and he kissed her until he thought he might lose control. He let her go and breathed deeply. "I'll let you get home. See you tomorrow." She nodded and said goodbye. She then opened the car door and ran away like a scared little rabbit. He watched her go. She ran to the front door. Her face was still very hot, and she was glad that she didn't meet anyone along the way. She made it to her room safely. What had happened with Bruno in his bedroom kept replaying in her mind. She felt happy, shy, nervous, and expectant. At that moment, her phone rang. She picked it up and saw that it was Bruno. He was using his hands-free kit to talk to her as he drove. "Are you inside?" "Yes." She hadn't expected him to call so soon, but as soon as she heard his voice, she realized that she missed him already. "Does it still hurt?" he asked. She immediately wished she could get under the blanket and hide. He didn't hear her answer, but he knew that she was feeling unsure about things. "I was too excited and couldn't control myself very well. Hopefully it won't hurt next time." Layla's whole body was burning. She wanted to get off that topic. "Bruno!" She heard quiet laughter through the phone. "You'll be tired after today. You should go to bed early tonight." The reference to her bedroom meant that she felt embarrassed all over again. "Okay." He didn't hang up. They just listened to each other's breathing, because neither wanted to sever the connection. Eventually, Bruno spoke up. "I can't wait for the new school year to start." She understood. Once school started, they could be together every day, and every night. She was mad at herself for the direction of her thoughts and tried to get the idea out of her head. They didn't end the call until he was about to get out of the car back at his home. She had already taken a shower and didn't need another. She lay on the bed and tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep. As he got out of the car, Bruno received a notification to say that the fitness equipment he had ordered had arrived at the city depot and would be delivered the next day. He was surprised because he thought it had arrived already. With it being so big and heavy, he had no idea what the package at his house was if it wasn't the fitness equipment. Confused, he went to the living room, took a knife, and began to cut through the tape. There was a foam box inside the cardboard one. It was sealed, and when he opened it, a foul stench assailed him. His eyes widened, and he wondered if someone had sent him seafood that had broken open and spoiled inside the package. He continued to work his way through the plastic seal, and then opened the big lid. When he saw what was inside, he reeled backward. He felt scared, and all the blood drained from his face. Layla had finally fallen asleep late that night. She was tired, but her brain was wired, and even in her sleep, all she could think about was Bruno. The next morning, she was alert as soon as her alarm went off. She sat up and sent him a message. "Good morning, I'm awake." She went to wash up because she remembered that they had planned a date for the day. After a long deliberation, she chose a white dress to wear. She changed into it and went out to eat breakfast. She put on some light makeup and was completely satisfied with her appearance. She checked her phone, but Bruno hadn't replied. She wondered if he had slept in after the previous day's exertions. She still felt a little bashful and went back to her room to play some video games for a while. After an hour, she still hadn't heard from him. She thought 10 o'clock was late for him, so she called. His phone went straight to voicemail. She sighed and decided that he must have forgotten to charge his phone. She continued to wait, but it was soon noon, and his phone still hadn't been turned on. Layla started to feel a little uneasy and thought of his injuries and the people who were out to hurt him. She decided to take the initiative to look for him. She ate a small lunch and told her mom that she had an appointment with some classmates. She then went straight to his dorm. He had shown her where he kept his spare key, so she let herself in. The living room was very quiet, but there was an unpleasant smell. It smelled a little like rotten eggs. Layla looked around the room and found that a window was open. She figured that the smell had drifted in from outside, so she didn't think any more about it. She went straight to his bedroom, but she was amazed to discover that it looked the same as when she had left the day before. The bed sheets hadn't been changed, and the towel that she had used was still there. It was almost as if he had never made it home. She was instantly worried. Where did he go last night? She searched several rooms but didn't find anything. When she went down the stairs, she found that the package they had taken the day before was missing. That meant he must have been home and gone out again. She felt very uneasy. She left a note for Bruno in the living room asking him to call her, and she made her way back out. Before she got home, Layla called Reggie and enlisted his help to find Bruno. Reggie agreed even though he was due to leave the country in the days to come. The previous night, Oliver had received a phone call. He had been informed that the raw materials being processed in Martinique had problems, and that he needed to discuss things in person with the relevant maritime departments. He had planned to go by himself, but when he realized that Reggie had already completed his college entrance exam and was at a loose end, he had asked his son if he wanted to go with him. Oliver had seen it as an opportunity to increase his son's knowledge and demonstrate problem-solving strategies. Reggie was on board with the idea, so they had booked tickets to go there as soon as possible. Later that same day, Layla still hadn't heard anything from Bruno. It wasn't until the evening of the next day that Reggie's men found out that Bruno was still at a club in Havana. She was stunned when she heard the name of the club because she knew that it had a reputation of being a place to drink on the surface, but in reality, it provided a variety of underground services. Her uneasiness grew. Reggie saw her expression and guessed what she was thinking. He took the car keys. "I'll come with you to find him." She nodded and followed him out at the door. They went all the way to the entrance of the club together, but it was there that she stopped him. "I'll go up by myself." Reggie nodded. "All right, but if you need anything, just call me." He then motioned for his bodyguard to follow at a safe distance. When she asked for Bruno, she was given a room card. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held it. She didn't know what to feel. She trusted Bruno, but she still felt nervous for some unaccountable reason. She rode the elevator and found the room. The door opened as soon as she swiped the room card. She then heard a female voice. "Who is that? And why do you have a key to our room?" Layla stopped right where she was, breathing shakily. The female speaker was followed by a male voice that couldn't be more familiar. Is it room service? Layla stood where she was, with the world spinning around her. The woman had seen Layla and was moving in her direction. She was wrapped in a bathrobe, her feet were bare, her long hair was loose, and her footsteps were languid. She looked doubtful as she studied their unexpected guest. Who are you? Why do you have a room card? She looked over her shoulder. There's someone in our room. Layla stared at her because the woman wasn't wearing much under the bathrobe. She wondered what kind of hell she had walked into. She couldn't move a muscle, and she felt all of her strength draining away. She stared blankly at the woman, unable to speak. Aware of some confusion, the owner of the male voice sauntered in. His eyes met Layla's. Bruno was also wearing a bathrobe, and his hair was wet, as though he had just taken a bath. His feet were bare, his bathrobe was loose, and the muscles on his body were on show. He hadn't expected to see Layla. He was stunned and immediately reached out for her. Layla! She suddenly found that she could move. She quickly took a step back to avoid his touch. She looked up at him with red eyes. What are you doing here? Bruno's lips moved, but no words came out. She persisted. Tell me, what are you doing here? He remained silent. There were too many motions to isolate in his eyes, but he didn't attempt to lie. Layla felt as if her heart was being ripped in two. She wanted to slap him, but she didn't move. She just looked at him and spoke through gritted teeth. Did you sleep with her? Bruno looked at her with anguish. He still didn't say anything. She was determined to find the truth. Are you in a relationship with her? He clenched his hands into fists before slowly releasing them. I'm sorry, Layla. In that second, everything became clear to her. She smiled at him, but it wasn't a happy smile. If I could stop time, I would have done it as soon as you dropped me home the other night. After saying that, she turned and left. She refused to look back. Once she was gone, the room was silent. Tears cascaded down Layla's face as she ignored the elevator and ran down the stairs and outside. Reggie saw his sister coming and knew that something was wrong. He got out of the car and opened his arms to her. She threw herself into them and covered him in tears and snot as she cried loudly. He patted her on the back to comfort her because he didn't know what to say. Layla didn't need comfort. She needed a place to vent and a warm embrace because she was both sad and cold. She eventually found her voice, but she struggled to piece the story together coherently. He's with another woman. He betrayed me. We've been together for so many years. How could he do this? I don't believe it. I can't accept it. He must have something wrong with him, right? He didn't know you would come looking for him. Bruno had been found, but the mystery of what was in the express delivery box remained. Layla was stunned. She couldn't believe Bruno was cheating on her. She looked at her brother with tears in her eyes. I don't get it. Why would he do something like this to me? Does this mean he doesn't want me anymore? Reggie tried to comfort her. Forget about him. You have your family. We'll help you get through this. I feel so awful. It's like someone stabbed me in the heart. Reggie felt incredibly sorry for his sister. He put his arms around her and hugged her tightly. She put her head on his shoulder and cried. They drove back to the house in silence. Layla stared out the car window, thinking about the past and trying hard not to burst into tears again. She had no idea how she would recover from the pain of being betrayed by the man she had grown up with and the man she loved. The following day, Reggie was traveling to Martinique with his father. He was worried about his sister, so he called Fiona before they left and asked her to keep an eye on her. He didn't want to tell Oliver what had happened. They boarded the plane, and Reggie checked his phone before they took off. Rebecca hadn't updated her social handle in weeks, and he wondered what she was doing. She was often in his thoughts. Part of him wanted to forget her, but another part was afraid of losing her forever. During the flight from Havana to Martinique, Oliver told his son how the hurricane had impacted the mines there. Francis, Oliver's business partner, was at the airport to pick them up when they landed. As they drove to the mines, he explained the damage the hurricane had caused. It destroyed the entire area, so we had to halt our mineral extraction operations. We're also suffering from a labor shortage, so the situation's dire at the moment. Oliver nodded grimly. Let's see the extent of the damage first. He was worried that if they couldn't deliver the raw materials to Houston on time, the entire operation would be delayed, which would have devastating financial consequences. The project was the William family's biggest investment to date. Oliver knew he had to solve the problem as quickly as possible. Once he confirmed when the raw material extraction and processing could be completed, he would need to contact the port authorities in Martinique and arrange for the goods to be transported to the United States with the merchant ships he had sent over. We've had several hurricanes in the past, but nothing like this, Francis continued. Unfortunately, the warning came late, so no one was prepared. It was absolutely terrifying. Buildings and bridges collapsed, and people lost their homes. Non-profit organizations are still busy distributing food and clothes to the locals and finding temporary accommodation for them. I heard another hurricane struck a few days later when volunteers were evacuating people, Oliver said. Yes, that's right. Over 24 people died, including some of the volunteers. Others went missing, and there's little hope of finding them. Reggie was shocked. He didn't realize the situation was so bad, and he wondered whether Rebecca was okay. Did anyone die in the mines? Oliver asked nervously. Francis shook his head. No, but the miners have been complaining about not getting their wages. With this recent tragedy and the damage to our facilities, I don't know how we can afford to pay them. It's going to upset them even more. Oliver nodded. He had already thought of a solution to the problem. They passed by the area that had been most severely damaged by the hurricane. There was a low tide at the moment, so they could see all the dead fish, trash, abandoned fishing boats, fallen trees, and algae on the beach. Reggie saw some people by the shore. His father explained that they were probably looking for the dead bodies of fishers who had been out at sea when the hurricane had hit. There were also volunteers in striped shirts and orange vests distributing food and water. Dad, can we stop here and talk to the volunteers? Reggie asked. Oliver was puzzled. Why? I just want to find out what happened to the volunteers who went missing. Is that okay? Are we in a hurry? Oliver could see how determined his son was, so he asked the driver to stop the car. Okay, let's go take a look. They got out of the car and walked down to the beach. Oliver shielded his eyes from the sun, looking at all the debris on the beach. Reggie approached a young woman who was handing out food and water to the authorities who were searching for washed-up bodies along the shore. Hi, are you a volunteer? She nodded. Do you know someone named Rebecca Gates? She's here with one of the disaster relief organizations. The woman thought for a moment before replying. Yes, I know who she is, but I haven't seen her in 2 days. We're all working in different areas. Maybe you should ask around. What different areas? Mostly along the beach, in coastal towns. That's where the hurricane hit the hardest. After thanking her, Reggie went up to a few other people. Everyone knew Rebecca, and they told him that they hadn't seen her for days. One man said she had been tending to injured locals in a village where the second hurricane had hit. Reggie's heart sank. Though he was still upset with her, he couldn't bear the thought of something happening to her. He no longer cared whether she had feelings for him or not. He just wanted her to be safe. Their two families had had a long-standing feud, but it had been settled, and it shouldn't affect their relationship. But he was still upset that she hadn't told him sooner that she was Davis. The possibility that she might be missing made him think of the past. He recalled how she had single-handedly gotten rid of 2 bullies at the age of 7. He remembered her doctoring Bruno, playing with her on the monkey bars at school, and throwing hoops on the basketball court. He swallowed the lump in his throat. No matter how much he tried to forget her, she was always on his mind. He couldn't face the possibility of never seeing her again. His father went up to him. Are you ready to go on, son? Did you find out what you wanted? Reggie nodded glumly. They got in the car and drove past another small town along the shore. Reggie asked if they could stop there too. Oliver frowned. Who are you looking for? Reggie didn't want to tell his father the truth. No one. He stared out the car window in frustration. he would have to look for Rebecca on his own. He wondered whether she had been swept out to sea. They weren't close friends anymore, but he sincerely wished her the best. He had always imagined her becoming an accomplished doctor or an aircraft engineer. They finally arrived at the mine. As soon as they stepped out of the car, they could tell something wasn't right. The mine manager rushed over to Oliver. "Sir, it's best if you leave. The miners are very upset, and I fear for your safety. I wanted to call you earlier to warn you, but the hurricane cut off all lines of communication in the area." Oliver ordered Reggie to go back to the car and wait for him there. The miners had already seen them, and they quickly surrounded Oliver. The mine foreman, who was tall, muscular, and intimidating, confronted him. "We haven't been paid in over 2 months. We can't help it if there was a hurricane. We demand you give us our wages for the work we've done." The others nodded in agreement, waving their fists angrily. Oliver remained calm. "Thank you for your hard work in the mines. I realize these are exceptional times, and I'm here to tell you that you'll be getting a generous pay raise if you agree to work overtime and extract the minerals. The hurricane has delayed the process, and we need to make up for lost time." The miners looked at him skeptically. "How about you give us our pay raise now? Do you know how many workers were injured during the hurricane? Who's going to pay for their medical expenses?" Oliver hesitated. It was a big ask, but he knew that if he didn't agree to their demands, his company would suffer even greater losses. "I can pay everyone by the end of the week. I'll also cover any medical expenses, including medication." The miners weren't satisfied, however, and they demanded they get their pay immediately. Oliver held up his hand, trying to explain the situation to them. He never expected them to be so angry. He had a nagging feeling that someone was behind the sudden revolt, though he had no idea who. Oliver instructed his son and Francis to go to the nearest bank to withdraw money so that they could pay the miners their wages. Francis nodded, and he signaled to Reggie to get in the car. But Reggie was worried. "Dad, will you be all right on your own?" "I'll be fine. Just go with Francis and get the money." Reggie got in the car, but instead of going to the bank, Francis drove to the main harbor. Reggie was puzzled. "What are we doing here? Is there a bank nearby?" Francis shook his head. "I'm sorry. This was your father's idea. He asked me to organize a boat for you just in case things got out of hand. It's not safe here." He pointed to the dock, where a speedboat was waiting. "It'll take you to an island not far from here. Accommodation has been arranged, and someone will pick you up when it's safe to return." Reggie shook his head. "No way. I'm not leaving without my dad." But Francis was insistent. "It's what he wants. Please, just go." Reggie looked out the car window and saw 2 muscular men in the boat staring back at him. He was afraid they would take him by force if he didn't cooperate, so he got out of the car. Francis watched Reggie climb into the speedboat and then drove to the nearest bank. He soon returned to the mines. The workers immediately accosted him, taking all the money. The foreman sneered. "Is that it? We were expecting a bigger pay raise." Oliver frowned. This was going from bad to worse. He was relieved he had sent Reggie away. Reggie sat in the speedboat anxiously, wondering what would happen to his father in Martinique. He saw a small island up ahead. As the driver steered the boat toward it, he suddenly lost control. He shouted to Reggie and his mate to jump overboard, but Reggie didn't understand a word since he was speaking in French Creole. The 2 men suddenly jumped into the water, but before Reggie could react, the boat crashed into a large reef and tipped over. Reggie felt a sharp pain in his head, followed by intense dizziness. He was thrown into the water, where he tried desperately to stay afloat. The seawater stung his eyes and his throat. He looked around for the 2 men who had been in the boat, but they disappeared. He swam over to the overturned boat and clung to it for dear life. He could feel a strong current beneath the water's surface. The boat started sinking, so he climbed onto the reef. He gasped, trying to catch his breath, and look around once more for the men. But they were nowhere to be seen. He figured the current must have swept them away. He touched the spot where he had hit his head, and he discovered he had a nasty gash that was bleeding. He climbed higher up the reef, so he could rest and gather his wits. Exhausted, he sat down. His body ached all over, and he couldn't stop coughing. He felt in his pocket for his phone, but it was gone. He knew that he couldn't have called anyone anyway so far out at sea. The sun beat down on him mercilessly. He fished a metal object from the speedboat out of the water, wondering if he could reflect sunlight off it and use it as a distress signal. He didn't have much hope of anyone finding him, however. He sat on the reef for several hours until his clothes were completely dry. The boat had sunk to the bottom of the sea, and the tide was rising. Reggie knew that by nightfall, the reef would be completely submerged in the water. If that happened, he would be swept away by the current. He was reeling from the day's events. He didn't know which was worse, Rebecca missing in action, his father being attacked by a bunch of miners, or being stuck on a reef in the middle of nowhere. He felt a sense of despair as he watched the water rising and lapping at the reef. He held the piece of metal up to the sun, hoping someone would notice the reflection and call for help. He shifted his position to make himself more comfortable. Just then, he noticed a body floating face down in the water. He gasped with horror when he realized it was the speedboat driver's corpse. Minutes later, the dead body of his mate appeared, and they were both swept away by the current. Reggie was terrified, wondering whether he would be next. He got up and started screaming for help. The sun slowly dipped below the horizon as the tide continued to rise. Large waves crashed against the reef, soaking his shoes and socks. Reggie's life flashed before his eyes. He thought of his sister at home in Havana, heartbroken because her boyfriend had cheated on her. He wondered how she would survive without him. He then thought of his mother and his father and how they would react when they found out their son had drowned off the coast of Martinique. He knew his father would never forgive himself. His thoughts then drifted to Rebecca. He wished he could see her one more time before the sea swallowed him up for eternity. Suddenly, he heard the sound of an engine in the distance. He looked around, trying to locate the boat, but he couldn't see anything. Reggie jumped up and down on the reef and waved his arms, hoping someone would spot him. At that moment, a helicopter appeared overhead. As it got closer to the reef, the door opened and a rope ladder was flung out. Reggie sighed with relief. His prayers had been answered. As he climbed up the ladder, he was shocked to see Rebecca leaning out the door with her arm extended. Rebecca was equally surprised to see Reggie climbing the rope ladder. She leaned out of the helicopter door, shouting above the engine's noise. "Quick! Grab my hand!" When he reached the top rung, he grabbed onto her outstretched hand and helped him into the cockpit. The rope ladder was quickly pulled up and the door closed. Reggie looked around, too stunned to speak. A young pilot in a military uniform sat in the pilot's seat. A local, who appeared to be injured, was next to him in the passenger seat, moaning. Rebecca looked at Reggie with concern. "Are you okay? Were you hurt? What happened?" "I'm fine. The speedboat I was in capsized. I climbed onto a reef to keep from drowning." "You have a nasty cut on your forehead." He touched the spot gingerly. "I must have hit my head on the boat when it turned over. I thought I was going to die back there." "Let me take a look." She quickly examined the wound. "It looks like you might need stitches. I can clean the cut, but it's best if a doctor examines you to make sure you don't have a concussion." "Okay, thanks." She pointed to his knee, which was also bleeding. "I can take care of that." She took out her medical kit. Reggie watched as she disinfected the cut and put a bandage on it. She then instructed him to close his eyes as she cleaned the gash on his forehead. "I'm sorry if it stings." "That's okay. Hey, were you here when the hurricane struck the island?" She nodded. "I was. My dad and I arrived this morning. We stopped at a beach and I asked some volunteers there if they had seen you. They told me you disappeared 2 days ago. What happened?" Before Rebecca could answer, Kyle turned around and signaled to her. "Could you get me some water?" She rummaged in her bag, found a bottle of water, and handed it to him. "Here you go." He took a swig and then gave her back the bottle. She sat down next to Reggie. "Sorry, where were we?" "Oh yes, we've been searching for survivors in the water for the past 2 days. Reggie pointed to the pilot. "Who's he?" "That's Kyle. We've known each other since we were kids. He rescued me during the hurricane." "I should thank him for that then," Reggie said, looking at the back of Kyle's head. She laughed. "You can thank him later." Kyle turned around and glanced at them. "Rebecca, the back of my neck feels itchy. Can you check it out? Is there a bug crawling on me?" She went over to him and examined his neck. "I can't see anything. Maybe you're developing a rash." He frowned. "It's definitely something. Should we go back to the airport?" He nodded. "Stay by my side and look out for survivors. See if you can spot any distress signals." "Okay." She sat next to him as he turned the helicopter around and headed back toward Martinique. Reggie watched them intently from the back of the cockpit. They seemed to have a certain familiarity and bond that suggested they were more than just childhood friends. Just then, Rebecca pointed to a spot on the water. "Look, someone's there!" Kyle expertly maneuvered the helicopter toward the location. He patiently explained to Rebecca what he was doing, pointing at various instruments and buttons on the control panel. Reggie noticed that she was leaning close to him, and their arms were touching. Rebecca looked at Kyle with adoration. At one point, Kyle smiled at her and ruffed her hair affectionately. Reggie stared at them for a while, and then he looked out the window, feeling a lump in his throat. Kyle lowered the helicopter while Rebecca opened the door and flung the rope ladder out. A woman who had been swept out to sea on a makeshift wooden raft climbed up, and Rebecca pulled her into the cockpit. She then told the woman to relax as she examined her for injuries. Reggie's heart sank. Rebecca was the same with everyone. He was no exception. A mere survivor stranded at sea who needed her help. The joy he had felt when he had seen her vanished. In its place was an indescribable sense of loss. The helicopter was full and fuel was running out, so Kyle turned the aircraft around and headed back to the island. "Rebecca, do you have your phone?" Reggie asked. She nodded. "Yes, but there's no signal up here. You'll have to wait until we get to the airport." "Okay, thanks. I lost mine when the boat capsized. If you don't mind, I'd like to use yours to make a call." She smiled at him. "You don't have to be so formal and courteous around me. We've known each other since we were kids." "It's cute, though." Reggie froze. The last thing he wanted was for her to think he was cute. She laughed when she saw his expression. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it as an insult. It's just that you've always been so polite and proper, like a young boy who's afraid to get into any trouble if he misbehaves." "My father taught me good manners." "I know. That's what sets you apart. There's something very noble about you." He broke into a smile. He didn't mind being called noble. He had always felt privileged and above everyone else. Kyle called out to Rebecca just then. "Hey, Becky, come over here. Can you get in touch with ground control?" She sat next to him again, and she contacted the ground control. The helicopter soon landed at a tiny airport on the other side of the island. Kyle turned around to get a good look at Reggie for the first time. Rebecca had already opened the helicopter door, and a group of medics were waiting on the tarmac to take away the 2 injured locals. She asked Reggie if he wanted to go with them so they could examine the wound on his head, but he told her he was feeling fine. They climbed out of the helicopter. It was getting dark, but there was enough light for Reggie to see Kyle clearly. He noticed that he was tall with broad shoulders and tan skin. He had a confident gait, and his muscles bulged underneath his military uniform. Kyle put his arms around Rebecca and squeezed her shoulder. "Are you tired?" She smiled up at him. "I'm okay. You must be exhausted, though. You did all the work." He kissed her on the forehead and then turned to Reggie. "I heard you wanted to make a phone call. You can use my phone." He handed it to him. Reggie thanked him, and he quickly called his father's number. There was no answer, however. He tried several times, but he kept getting Oliver's voicemail. He became anxious. As soon as they were inside the airport terminal, he asked a local how far the mines were. "The mines are on the other side of the island, but I wouldn't recommend going over there. The miners are on strike, and a fight has broken out. It was in the news earlier." Rebecca noticed that Reggie looked concerned about something. "Well, what's wrong?" He turned to her. "My father's there, and he won't answer his phone. I'm afraid something's happened to him. I need to go help him." "What's he doing there?" "It's a long story. The mines belong to him. We were there earlier, but he sent me away when the situation got out of hand. That's how I ended up on the boat. It was taking me to safety." She nodded. "Okay, I think I can round up some volunteers. You shouldn't go on your own." "Let's find out where it is, and we can take the helicopter," Kyle suggested. Reggie looked at him gratefully. "Thanks. I'll pay for the fuel." Kyle waved his hand dismissively. "That's okay. Can't be that far." He turned to Rebecca. "Are you coming with us?" She smiled. "Of course. I would never leave your side." Reggie's heart sank as he watched them. He knew beyond a doubt that they were a couple. Kyle left them, and he returned a few minutes later with 2 guns. He handed one to Rebecca. Reggie was shocked. "What do you need those for?" "You never know. Things could get ugly," Rebecca replied. "Do you know how to shoot a gun?" Kyle asked her. "You know I do." Kyle went to check whether the helicopter had been refueled. Rebecca grabbed Reggie's hand. "Come on, let's go find your dad." He was stunned. It was the first time they had held hands as adults. He vaguely recalled holding her hand when they had been children, though he wasn't sure. He didn't have much time to think about it, however. They boarded the helicopter and flew off. Rebecca flew the helicopter and Kyle guided her. She had only recently learned to fly a helicopter, and the controls were very different from those of an airplane. Kyle's body was close to hers, and now and then, when he reached out to show her something, he would inadvertently touch her arm. The mine wasn't far away, and a few minutes later they arrived. There were some lights on, and in the distance, they could see Oliver in amongst a group of miners. They seemed to be involved in some kind of dispute. As the helicopter drew closer, the people looked up and watched as it circled overhead with its rotors roaring. Kyle got up and went to Reggie in the cabin. "Is your father the one in the middle?" "Yes." Kyle returned to his seat next to Rebecca. "Becky, move in closer." She maneuvered the helicopter until it was hovering only a few feet above the ground, and for the first time, the people below seemed to recognize that the aircraft wasn't on their side. They held their tools over their heads as if they might throw them at the helicopter's propellers. As they looked up at the aircraft, Kyle appeared at the cabin door. He stepped out onto the landing gear and shot his gun up into the sky. The people below stopped their hostilities and looked up at him. Kyle shouted a few words at them, and then he jumped off the helicopter and walked up to Oliver. Oliver watched him suspiciously. "Your son asked me to come," Kyle said quietly into his ear. "Cooperate with me." Then, he spun around and repositioned himself behind Oliver. He thrust the muzzle of his gun to his temple. The miners looked on in confusion. They had no idea what was going on. Just then, the foreman seemed to realize that with Kyle preoccupied with Oliver, they could storm the helicopter, and he charged the aircraft. But Rebecca saw him coming. She aimed her gun at him, and he stopped in his tracks. With Rebecca holding the men back, Kyle was able to lead Oliver to the helicopter and help him climb on board. The chopper lifted off the ground, and it soon disappeared from sight. Oliver patted Kyle and Rebecca on the shoulder. "Thank you." Kyle nodded. "It's fine. I'm sorry if I offended you just now." Only then was Oliver able to look at his son. He saw the gauze on Reggie's leg and the scrape on his forehead, and his heart sank. "Reggie, what happened?" "It's nothing. Let's talk about it when we get back. What exactly was going on down there?" "There's someone behind this mine strike." Oliver frowned. "And I'm pretty sure whoever it is has been planning it for some time. I'm afraid that this isn't the only thing he wants." "You mean he's plotting against our family?" "Yes. When we get back, I'll take a proper look into it. So let's not talk about it for the time being." Oliver felt that if it was money the person wanted, they would have gone about things differently. He knew that there must be some other objective. Everyone fell silent for a minute or two. Rebecca was the first to speak. "Reggie, our volunteers are all staying in a communal dormitory. Where are you and your father staying?" "In the city center, but there's nowhere for helicopters to land, so you can just take us to the dock." "Thank you so much for saving me and Reggie today," Oliver said. May I ask your name? Reggie tensed up. His father still didn't know Rebecca's true identity, and he was worried she might momentarily forget. He couldn't begin to imagine how Oliver would react if he were to discover who she really was. Rebecca hesitated. My name is Rebecca Gates. Reggie let out a sigh of relief. Everything was safe, at least for the time being. Thank you again, Miss Gates. The dock wasn't far away. As soon as the helicopter moved far enough from the mine, Oliver's phone picked up a signal, so he was able to arrange for someone to pick him and Reggie up. Rebecca found a suitable place to land, and she brought the helicopter down and shut down the rotors. She took off her helmet and handed it to Kyle. I still find flying at night challenging. You can do it next time, so I can watch and learn from the passenger seat. Kyle nodded. You got it. Reggie stepped out from the helicopter and saw that Rebecca still hadn't moved from her seat. Rebecca? Huh? She seemed to be lost in her thoughts. I'd like to give Kyle some fuel money. Can you give me his account details so that I can transfer it to him? Oh, it's fine. There's no need for that. She smiled sweetly at him as she hopped down from the cockpit. It's our job to rescue people. We don't expect them to pay us. He shuffled awkwardly on his feet. In that case, thank you both very much. She waved her hand dismissively. As I said, just doing my job, but you're welcome. Then she waved to him. Goodbye. Stay safe. Reggie glanced across at Kyle, who was leaning against the front of the helicopter, waiting for Rebecca. Have a safe journey. Then he turned and went to join his father. Kyle came around the helicopter and raised his hand to give Rebecca a high five. As her hand met his, he grabbed it and held on. Whether she used too much force to high-five him or he used too much force when he took her hand, Rebecca didn't know. But either way, she fell uncontrollably into his arms. Rebecca's arms fell around Kyle's waist, and her fingers inadvertently felt the firm muscles there. There wasn't an inch of fat on him. It took her a few seconds to stabilize herself, and when she looked up, she saw Kyle looking off into the distance. What are you looking at? She couldn't help feeling a little perturbed. Oh, nothing. She shrugged and jumped back into the cockpit of the helicopter. Kyle brought his gaze back and followed her. When Rebecca had been in his arms, he had noticed Reggie watching from afar. He smiled to himself and closed the door as he settled into the pilot's seat. He started the engine, and the helicopter rose into the air again. He steered it in the direction of the volunteers' accommodation, where Rebecca was staying. It wasn't far from Kyle's air rescue base, and after he landed the aircraft, he walked Rebecca to her room. The night sea breeze was light, bringing with it a slight chill. In the dimness of the night sky, the place was peaceful and beautiful. They walked side by side along the narrow street. You seem to know that guy quite well. Who, Reggie? Yeah, we were in elementary school together, so I guess I do know him pretty well. Kyle kept his tone casual and neutral. What did you mean when you said he was noble? You heard that? She chuckled. It's not easy to explain. You'll understand once you get to know him. He has seemingly conflicting personality traits. Just like you. She gave him a quizzical look. His dark eyes seemed to be deeper than usual under the night sky, and she found them hard to read. What do you mean? Well, you have lots of opposite traits. Sometimes you're sharp and sometimes you're soft. You're smart, but you can also be a little bit silly. She gasped with feigned shock. Me? Silly? When? He laughed out loud, and he ruffled her long hair. Right now. She frowned at him. I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm being smart right now. How could I possibly be silly at the same time? Kyle didn't reply because he was thinking about the way Reggie had looked at Rebecca earlier. It was obvious the boy was in love with her. If she genuinely couldn't see that, it proved just how silly she could be. But sometimes it was good to be silly. Being smart and serious all the time could be tiring. He sighed. This girl is becoming more and more beautiful with each day. It's scary. She pulled on his sleeve, and he realized she had been speaking to him. Are you listening to me? I'm not stupid. I never said you were stupid. There's a big difference between stupid and silly. Most of the time, you're very smart. Rebecca thought she might explode. I really don't like this tone of yours. He ran off, laughing, and she chased after him. There was something about him that made her behave childishly. It annoyed her because it made her feel as if she wasn't in control of her own emotions. But he seemed to like her childish behavior, so he let her chase him all the way back to her accommodation block. When they arrived at her door, he was laughing and out of breath, but she was scowling and not happy at all. He ran his fingers through her messy hair to tidy it. I'll see you tomorrow. The scowl remained, and she ignored him. But Kyle didn't mind. He saw her safely inside and then turned around and left. For the next few days, Rebecca and Kyle continued to search for survivors together. But after 3 full days of searching, the cost of the rescue operation had soared, and the search was officially called off. No more survivors had been found. The local government calculated the number of casualties, and the entire country mourned for those lost in the hurricane. Kyle had to return to base with his unit, but Rebecca had to remain for another week. On the day he left, she went to see him off. The early morning light was dim, and he stood facing her in the mist. Then he leaned over and whispered in her ear, "Promise me you'll keep on being silly, Becky." The smooth, honey texture of his voice reverberated through her ears and into her heart. But his words didn't annoy her that time. Instead, her heart beat faster. He did that on purpose. Even when he's leaving, he's still trying to wind me up. Kyle smiled nonchalantly and stroked her hair, and then he turned and left without looking back. As he walked away, the sun crept above the horizon and shrouded him in a golden halo. Rebecca stood rooted to the spot, and an irresistible emotion surged inside her. If she hadn't been sure before, she was absolutely sure from that moment on. He likes me. Rebecca was convinced that Kyle liked her. He had deliberately shown off his strength in front of her and carried her on his back in the desert. She had thought that maybe he had just been teasing her, but in the last few days, she realized that he was jealous of Reggie. When he had told her to keep being silly, it had been her moment of enlightenment. But why would he be jealous of Reggie? He's just an old classmate that we saved from the hurricane. Could have been anyone. Usually, when they flew together, Kyle would issue an instruction, and then he would run his fingers through her hair. But he never did it when other people were on the aircraft with them. However, when Reggie and Oliver had been with them that day, he had shown his affection and had ruffled her hair. I'm sure he likes me the way a man likes a woman, not in a brotherly way. She knew that older brothers could be possessive of their younger sisters, sometimes to protect them from getting hurt. And she hoped that wasn't the way Kyle looked upon her. She rubbed her temples and took a few deep breaths. In any case, I'm still young. There's still plenty of time for all that. There's no point in worrying about it now. 5 days later, Reggie and Oliver returned to Havana. In the days since the rescue, Oliver had gone to the Maritime Department and had gotten to the bottom of what had happened at the mine and who was behind it all. The problems surrounding the supply of raw materials and transportation were resolved. Reggie had accompanied his father all the way and had learned a lot about how to run a company. Reggie felt relieved that it was all over, but Oliver had the feeling that something was still wrong. He dug a little deeper, but he found nothing. The only thing he seemed to prove was that he was being paranoid and suspicious of everything. He decided he would continue investigating when he was back in Havana. He and Reggie boarded the airplane and took their seats. As they settled down for the flight, Oliver started questioning his son. Do you like that girl? No. Reggie's response was immediate and defensive. Oliver gave him a meaningful look. Come on, Reggie. That was a pretty rapid reaction. What's the matter? Nothing. Reggie looked out of the window, feeling annoyed with his father. But Oliver wasn't going to let it go. He couldn't understand his son's pride. Is she the student you mentioned before? The one who got into the Air Force Academy? She seems like a pretty smart girl. Do you think anything is going on between her and that other guy? Reggie couldn't bear to admit it, but he did suspect that Rebecca and Kyle had something going on. Now that you've completed your college entrance exam, I can teach you anything you want to learn. Oliver continued. You can start learning how to run the company. I'll let you complete the simple negotiations independently. And don't be afraid of losing money when you're starting out. Some experiences can't be bought with money. It's normal to make mistakes at first. Reggie nodded half-heartedly. Oliver considered his son's state of mind and sighed. If there is a girl you like, Reggie, you must take the initiative to fight for her. There's nothing shameful about liking a person, even if she rejects you. It doesn't matter in the long run. You'll only regret it if you don't try. Reggie squirmed with frustration and tightened his grip on the armrest between him and his father. Oliver placed his hand on his son's arm. I just don't want you to have any regrets, that's all. Reggie wanted to blurt out that he did like the girl and that she was Jonathan Davis's daughter, but he knew that would only spell certain disaster. It was dark by the time they landed in Havana. While they had been away, Layla had been staying at Zoe's place. Reggie texted her to let her know he was back, and she replied, telling him that she would be there first thing the following morning. Reggie woke up the next day to find his sister already there. She waited impatiently while he ate his breakfast, and then she signaled to him to go upstairs so they could talk. They went upstairs to Layla's room and closed the door. He had a pretty good idea of what was on her mind. Without bothering to ask him about his trip, she launched straight into what was troubling her. I've been thinking about it for days, and I know something's happened to Bruno. He wouldn't do that to me. Can you help me find out where he is again? Reggie just sighed. I don't care what he's done wrong, Layla continued. I just need to know he's okay. She took her brother's hand and gazed pleadingly at him. Can you help me? Please? Reggie thought about what his father had said, and at that moment he felt envious of his sister. She had courage and persistence, and wasn't afraid to go after what she wanted. Sure, I'll help you. Layla's eyes lit up, and she gave him a big hug. Thanks, Reggie, you're the best. Don't tell Mom and Dad, though, okay? Okay. So later that day, Reggie asked someone to investigate Bruno's whereabouts secretly. Bruno had had no intention of hiding, so it wasn't long before the investigator discovered where he was. But Reggie hadn't expected to find out what he found, and it was another few days before he felt confident enough that his sister wouldn't be scared by it. Only then did he give her the address. Layla's heart sank when she read the address Reggie gave her. It was a hospital in Havana, and Bruno was there as an inpatient following surgery. She was worried sick. She thanked her brother, changed her clothes, and went straight to the hospital. All the way, her emotions were in a whirl. She finally arrived and opened the door to his room and saw him. Bruno would never forget the feeling he had felt when he opened the delivery box several nights ago. The stench penetrated his nostrils, making him feel faint and nauseous. He looked inside. A dog that had clearly been dead for several days lay at the bottom of the box in a sickening state of decomposition. The ice that someone had put with it to preserve it had been completely ineffective. Bruno stared in horror and disbelief at the ugly sight for a long time, and then he noticed an insulation layer on one side of the box with something inside it. He removed the item and found that it was a laptop with a sticky note attached. The stench of the rotting animal was unbearable, and his stomach churned. He quickly placed the lid back onto the box and ran to the bathroom, where he emptied the contents of his stomach into the toilet. Once his stomach had settled, he drank thirstily from the tap, and then he wiped his mouth and returned to the living room. He peeled the note off the laptop and read it aloud. Say hi to Blackie. Who's going to be next? Bruno's stomach churned again. This laptop belongs to your dad. Do you want to know what's in it? Well, it's your lucky day because I'm in a good mood, so I'm going to give you the password. Bruno felt sick again. The words on the paper blurred before him as he stared hard at it, petrified. Blackie had been his mother's dog. He had been afraid of him at first, but the dog had gone on to save his life. One day, when he had been playing in the garden at the Healy house, someone had pushed him from behind, and he had fallen into a pond. Blackie had heard him cry for help, jumped into the water, and dragged him out. Ever since then, he and the dog had been close. But that had been years ago. He had grown up, and Blackie had aged and become arthritic. The image of the dead dog filled his mind. Did he die naturally, or did those bastards kill him? An intense anger surged inside him, and he clenched his fists tightly. His eyes filled with malice. And those words on the note that hinted that it would be someone else next time made him shiver. They'd better not hurt Layla, or Zoe. He felt his temples throbbing, and a burning fire spread throughout his body. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, readying himself for what he might find on the laptop. Bruno slowly opened the laptop and entered the password his tormentors had provided in the note. A folder appeared on the screen, and he felt compelled to open it. Inside the folder were a number of documents, sorted in order of date. He opened the first one and began to read. The content was disturbing, and he felt his stomach churn once more. Today I took a fancy to a girl. She's still in school, and she looks so sweet and innocent. I want to get to know her intimately. I inquired about her. Her name's Zoe. She doesn't come from an important family, so it looks like I can make a move. Zoe's family's quite poor. I got someone to create a fake advert for a part-time job that would suit someone like her. I couldn't believe it when she applied. She actually gave me her contact details and sent me her resume. Bruno wanted to stop reading the entries, but something made him go on. Damn it. That Zoe actually dared to hit me. She even knocked me out. My assistant arranged for her to come to the clubhouse for an interview, and she refused to accept my offer for a drink. Does she not realize how honored she should be to have caught my eye? She actually dared to hit me. If I see her again, I'll kill her. Bruno took a break from the documents and got himself a glass of water. He could feel a headache coming on. When he felt a little better, he read the next file in the folder. I sent someone to beat up Zoe's mother. I heard that she's now paralyzed, but I don't care. I think it's good that she's paralyzed. She'll probably have to fork out a lot of money on surgery and the like. I want to see how long it'll be before she starts begging me. It's over. The Gonzalez family has found out who I am. They know that my real name is Terry Dunn. I can only gamble on how long I can survive. That was the last document in the folder. There were no more records after that, and Bruno knew it was because Terry Dunn was dead. His father, who had been pretending to be someone else for years, was dead. But the things he had done made Bruno sick to the core. Several years ago, when Oliver had tried to take Layla away, Zoe had told Layla and Bruno the truth about her and Oliver's relationship. So Bruno knew that Zoe had been forced into surrogacy to help support her disabled mother. But at that time, he had no idea that she had been forced into it because of his own biological father, who had caused her mother to be paralyzed. And he had tried to do such a terrible thing to her. Thankfully, he hadn't succeeded, but he had cast a shadow over Zoe's entire life. Bruno couldn't describe all the emotions that tumbled around inside him. He felt as if he had been thrown into hell. He felt dirty. The thought of being born to a man like that filled him with disgust and shame, and a part of him even felt as if it was his fault. Layla was the one salvation in his life, and he wondered how he could ever let her go. No one liked to live in hell, and everyone deserves some sunlight in their lives. He stumbled back to the delivery box and found some strong tape. He sealed the lid with tape and carried the box to his car. He put the box and a shovel into the trunk, and then he drove all the way to the forest on the outskirts of town, where he began to dig. It was midnight by the time he had dug a big enough hole, and he carefully placed Blackie and the box into it. He found that he was shivering, and only then did he realize it was a cold night. His face was wet with tears, and the cold air cooled them quickly, making his face feel icy. Drizzling rain began to fall, mingling with his tears. He said a few words for Blackie, and then he went back and sat in the car. He sobbed pitifully for several minutes. He felt like he was on the verge of a breakdown. Just then, his phone vibrated with a text message. He took it out of his pocket and read it. "You were lucky to escape that day, but don't worry, we won't come after you again. I think your girlfriend's quite sweet. I wonder what she tastes like. We don't mind sharing your leftovers. After all, we're all friends, right?" Once again, Bruno felt the anger surge through him. At that moment, he really wanted to kill someone. A minute later, he received another message. "You bastard! Why haven't you answered me yet? If your girlfriend knew what your father almost did to your mother, what would she think of you? What would your future mother-in-law think of you? We'd love to know." Bruno swallowed his pent-up anger and tried to calm his emotions. A thought began to form in his mind. What if these people texting me died? If they died, no one could threaten me anymore, and no one could bully Layla or Zoe anymore. The more he thought about it, the more it made sense to him. With them dead, my secret would be safe. Zoe would never know that Terry Dunn was my biological father, and she would continue to love me like she always has. He knew what had to be done. He started the car engine and drove home through the rain. The dorm still smelled bad, so he got to work disinfecting all the surfaces that the delivery box had touched and spraying the place with air freshener. The whole time, he formed his plan to get rid of his tormentors in one go. Lots of ideas came to mind, but he knew that once it was done, there was a huge risk that he would get caught and end up in jail. He might even get the death penalty. He wasn't afraid of death, but he didn't want to leave Layla. It would hurt her too much. He was too anxious to sleep, so he continued to build upon his plan all night. The following morning, his mother called to tell him that the Healy family was hosting a dinner on Saturday evening and that he should attend. It was Wednesday evening, so he had plenty of time to prepare everything before dinner. But the method he was going to use was dangerous, and there was a chance he wouldn't survive the weekend. So he would have to end things with Layla first. It was the only thing he could do to protect her. That way, if he got caught, she wouldn't be implicated. And if he died, that would be the end of them anyway. Sometimes, hate is easier to let go of than love. That evening, Bruno left home and went to a local nightclub to begin the execution of his plan. He asked for a private room and ordered an escort. In the room, he told the woman what he wanted her to do, and she agreed to act the part for him. Then, he sat and waited. Before long, Layla arrived, and Bruno and the woman began to act according to his script. He looked at Layla's pained eyes and heard her trembling voice, and he felt his heart breaking in two. It was all he could do to stop himself from crying. "I didn't ask for this. It's not my fault who my parents are." He had been tortured by the circumstances surrounding his birth for 20 years. It was time to end it. He was going to kill someone, and from then on, he would forever have blood on his hands. Even if I survive, would she want me back after what I'm about to do? But he had no choice. He watched the tears flow down Layla's cheeks as she left, but he stood his ground. The only ray of light in his life had been extinguished. He walked to the window and saw her collapse into her brother's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Bruno wanted to run after Layla and tell her that nothing had happened between him and the woman she had just seen him with, but that wouldn't help the situation, and it would only make things worse. If he didn't get rid of the Healy brothers, they would continue to harass him for the rest of his life. They would be like a perpetual dark shadow looming over him. They would also probably bully his children if he married Layla and started a family with her. He clenched his fist and punched a window. The glass shattered, and his hand started to bleed immediately. Bruno didn't feel any pain. Instead, he felt numb, devoid of any emotion other than anger. He staggered into the kitchen and wrapped his hand in a dish towel to soak up the blood. Then, he sat at the kitchen table and unlocked his phone. He scrolled until he found Layla's phone number. He blocked her from all his messaging and social media apps before deleting her number. Bruno was wearing a tailored suit and slipped a small vial of potion into his jacket pocket. He smoothed his hair back and got into the car. He arrived at the Healy mansion just as the dinner party had started. Everyone looked the same as they always had. They greeted each other with fake smiles, and the men boasted about their latest achievements. The women wore designer evening gowns and expensive jewelry. They clinked their glasses as they toasted, making Bruno feel nauseous with disgust. Bruno wouldn't have wanted anything to do with the Healy's if it hadn't been for the house where he and Layla had grown up. He patiently waited for the right opportunity to roll out his plan and quietly watched everyone enjoy themselves. He felt calm and serene. The chance he had been waiting for finally presented itself when the 4 Healy brothers went outside to the patio to smoke cigars and drink spiced rum. As he followed them outside, he carefully took the vial from his jacket pocket and hid it in his closed hand. He waited for the server to bring out a tray with glasses and a rare vintage spiced rum. The server then offered the brothers cigars from a wooden box and waited as they clipped off the tops and lit their cigars. Plumes of sweet smoke filled the air. No one paid attention to Bruno, and he quickly emptied the vial's contents into the rum bottle. He gestured for the waiter to leave and poured each brother a glass of rum. Pretending to be submissive, he handed them their drinks and cleared his throats. "I'm sorry about what happened earlier. It was all my fault. I shouldn't have picked a fight with you. It's just that I like Layla. She's a nice girl. If you leave her alone, you can do whatever you want with me." Just as he had expected, they sneered at him and laughed. Bruno ignored them and raised his glass to make a toast. "To the Healys. I know I'm the family bastard and the runt in the litter, but we're all adults now. Let's leave our feuds in the past where they belong." The brothers roared with laughter and clinked their glasses. "To the family bastard!" They swallowed their rum in one gulp, and Bruno quickly went around the table to refill the empty glasses. He smiled, as if he no longer minded that they looked down on him, and continued to top off their drinks as soon as they had finished them. He sat down and drank a large mouthful from his glass. He gulped as the spicy liquid rolled down his throat. "I've become the devil," he thought, as he waited for the poison to take effect. Bruno felt as though he had stooped so low that he had fallen into the depths of hell, to be forever lost in the endless abyss of darkness and despair. He poured everyone another round and swallowed his drink in one gulp. Suddenly, an image of Layla flashed before his eyes, and he felt a deep longing for her. He didn't know if the poison would kill him, and he realized gloomily that if it did, someone else would take his place and share their life with her. Someone else would see her through to her old age and care for her as he had always dreamed of doing. The taste of the spicy rum lingered in his mouth, and he felt the burning liquid slide into his stomach. He closed his eyes and reminded himself that it was the only way to protect Layla from the evil clutches of the Healy brothers. He had poisoned himself to avoid any suspicion. He opened his eyes and looked at his brothers, feeling as if he had already died. The conversation was lively, and they puffed on their cigars until, suddenly, one by one, their eyes went wide. One of them clutched at his throat and began to gag. He tried to stand up, but stumbled and fell onto the floor. Pot plants and trellises with creepers and flowers lined the patio, and it was almost impossible to see what was happening from inside the dining room. Bruno felt his breathing become labored, and his vision started to blur. He looked around and saw that his 4 brothers had begun to foam at their mouths and gasp for air. 2 slumped in their seats, while 1 lay motionless on the hard floor. Bruno stood up, and his knees buckled. He crawled past a pot plant and pushed through a gap in the trellis. The room spun, and he couldn't see where he was going, but the vision of a beautiful girl's face appeared in his mind's eye. She smiled at him and called out his name in her soft voice. He reached out his hand to touch her and felt the warm leg of someone standing before him. As he slipped out of consciousness, he heard women screaming and men yelling. The room erupted in chaos, and the noise was deafening. Then, Bruno passed out. Bruno opened his eyes and squinted in the bright light. His stomach ached, and his whole body felt weak. He tried to rub his eyes, but his fingers felt numb. He rolled his head to the side and saw a drip in his hand. He looked at the clear solution in the drip bag and watched a tiny drop flow into the tube. A chill ran through his body, and he shivered. He tried to move, but his body felt like lead. He tried to talk, but his mouth was too dry. He only managed a grunting sound, and the air leaving his lungs burned his throat. Bruno lay still for what seemed like an eternity until a nurse finally entered the room and noticed that he had woken up. "You're awake! How are you feeling?" Bruno grunted again. "Water." The nurse picked up a glass of water from the bedside table and placed a straw in it. She helped him sit up and waited as he took a long, slow sip. He looked around the room in confusion. The nurse shook her head. "The others aren't here." He nodded slightly, and his voice croaked. "Are they okay?" His heart sank as he realized they might have survived. The nurse smiled kindly at Bruno and waited for him to take another sip of water. "You were brought in last night together with a few other people. 2 of the men had already passed away by the time the ambulance arrived at the hospital. The other 2 died during the night. Apart from you, the only other patient still alive is a middle-aged woman." Bruno gasped in shock. "A woman?" The nurse nodded. "Yes, she was at the same party as you last night." Bruno's eyes widened, and he began to tremble. "Where is she?" He tried to swing his legs off the bed, but the nurse stopped him. "Take it easy. She's in the intensive care ward." She propped a pillow behind his head. "I'm sorry to tell you this, but she's in a critical condition and is on life support. I believe the doctor said that she's brain dead." Bruno's eyes rolled back, and he thought he would faint. His heart began to race, and he racked his brain as he tried to recall what had happened after he had taken the last gulp of his drink. He couldn't understand how someone else had been poisoned. He remembered talking to the 4 Healy brothers, and then it occurred to him that one of them had gotten up to speak to someone just behind the trellis. He hadn't been able to see who it was, and suddenly realized it might have been Isabella. He wondered if she had taken a sip of the man's drink. Maybe he offered her a taste of it. After all, it was a rare vintage rum that had been brought out specially for the occasion. A chill ran down his spine, and he felt sick in his stomach. He had killed the 4 Healy brothers and was glad for it. They had bullied and tortured him from the day he had met them, and had made his life a living hell. Although his mother had never shown him any love, he had never wanted to hurt her. Even though she had abandoned him for years on end, and had made him feel like a burden and a disgrace, the thought of harming her had never once crossed his mind. She had been a terrible mother. She had watched how the Healy brothers had teased him and beat him up. She had never done anything to stop them, but she was still his mother. She had carried him for 9 months and had given birth to him. She had given him his life. Bruno felt his chest tighten, and the world around him became dark. All he could think was that he wanted to die. He decided that he would kill himself and put an end to his misery. The nurse watched the color drain from his face. "Are you okay?" He shook his head. "Can you take me to see her? I think she might be my mother." The nurse nodded and patted him kindly on the arm. "Yeah, lay back and try to calm down. I'll call Nurse Sharon to arrange a wheelchair for you." Nurse Sharon arrived, pushing a wheelchair. She helped Bruno out of bed and into the wheelchair before attaching his drip bag to a small stand mounted against the frame. The younger nurse returned to the room. "The patient who came in with you has been moved out of the ICU and into a private ward down the hallway." Nurse Shannon nodded and wheeled Bruno out of the room. As they approached Isabella's ward, he heard the sound of agitated voices. "What do they mean she's brain dead? I don't understand. Is she in a coma?" "I've heard that people can wake up from being in a coma. Will she wake up?" "No, she's brain dead. They put her on a ventilator to keep her breathing. She's not going to wake up." How could this have happened? Where did the rum come from? Did they all die? They say that bastard son of hers survived. The nurse wheeled Bruno into the room, and a group of angry people gawked at him in surprise. An elderly woman glared at him. "You miserable boy! You killed the Healy brothers and your own mother!" Another woman scowled. "What has our family done to deserve this? Someone has to call the police." The elderly woman nodded. "Yeah, Why is he the only one alive? He should be arrested. The old man with a long beard shook his cane at Bruno. You bastard child! Hugh Healy and his superstitions. He should have gotten rid of you when he still had the chance. Instead, he kept you alive because of the nonsense that crazy old fortune-teller told him. Bruno sat in the wheelchair and stared at Isabella's motionless body. He didn't react to the cruel words being thrown at him. He watched as Isabella's chest rose and fell in time to the ventilator beside her bed, and tears welled in his eyes. He knew what the term brain-dead meant, and it was as good as saying that she was gone. Warm tears streamed down his cheeks, and he sobbed like a small child. The old man glared at him. What rubbish! Look at the boy cry. He's not fooling anyone. The people who had gathered in Isabella's room were all from her side of the family, and no one from the Healy family was present. Bruno wiped his face against his arm. Please, push me closer. Nurse Sharon wheeled him to Isabella's side. He knew that the ventilator was keeping her alive, and she would slip away the moment it was switched off. He gazed at his mother's pale face. She looked calm and peaceful, as if she were in a deep sleep.